everyone and welcome to another video. If you're new, I'm Emma, I'm an illustrator based in Sheffield and these are my daily-ish vlogs, and if you've watched me before, you'll know that I have a bit of a children's book addiction. Whenever I go to the charity shop, I buy new ones, especially ones that I've not seen before, like foreign editions, things from other cultures, and I thought I would share in this video my favourite ones and why. Collected a bunch of my favourite ones. This is by no means an exhaustive list. Next week I might have a new favourite book that I had just discovered in a charity shop. So it's kind of like a starting point. A lot of these are books that I'd never heard of the authors before. Some of them are very familiar. I'm sure a lot of you will know some of them. Which one to start with though? That's the thing. So just picking the top of the pile. This is a book by, and I'm unsure of how to pronounce the author and illustrator's name. Is it Junko or Yunko? Yunko Morimoto? And it's Big Nuisance. I found this in a charity shop. I'd never heard of the author before. Apparently they're very, very well known in Australia and that side of the world. They might be well known here as well, but I'd never heard of them. So Big Nuisance, it's a really lovely book. So let me read the back. Life in Sleepy Village is very slow and nothing's changed for a long time, until the meddlesome giant Big Nuisance comes to stay and starts a whole lot of trouble. Set in a small village in ancient Japan, this is a wickedly funny fable by one of Australia's best loved picture book artists. One thing that made me choose this book was the illustrations, and as well that I'd never heard of them before. It's always nice to push the boundaries of your experience. You might have your favourite things, but you don't know if something else out there is just as good or better than your favourite things if you never experience it. But the illustrations were so wonderful. They're like a watercolour, wet on wet technique. So you can see how all the colours have kind of bled into themselves. Very organic, very natural, very yummy. Look at the colours. They're like the light yellow contrasted against this dark, big, organic, lovely illustrations. And then on top of that, you've got more well-defined details. So you've got the village people here, villages of Sleepy Village, is it? Sleepy Village. Contrasted against the smudgy, watery background. And the giant himself, or themselves, is just so delicious. You can see on the cover as well, where all of these, the inks that are being used have started to bleed, contrasted by the sharp lines. There's just something about it that I really love. Let me find my favourite page in this book. This is what I'm going to do for all of the books. Find my favourite illustration. So there's a few in this book, but the one that I've chosen is really simple, and I like it because of the use of the white and the page. It's quite brave, I think. I think when you do children's book illustrations or illustrations in general, backgrounds can be a bit of a sticking point. Sometimes you don't know what to do, you don't know how much detail to add, if any, because if you add too much detail, it detracts from the foreground. There's lots to consider when making a background, and to have just a white background, I think is quite brave, but I really love this illustration. Very simple, you know what's going on. You kind of, even if you didn't know that this was about a giant, because the ear is so big, you know it's about something big. But yeah, Big Nuisance by Junko Morimoto. Let me know in the comments if you've heard of this picture book author illustrator. Let me read about them. Junko Morimoto was born in Hiroshima and came to live in Australia in 1982. She's written and illustrated many best-selling picture books including My Hiroshima, The Inch Boy, Conjuro and the Bears, The Two Bullies and Run Damon Run. So if you've never heard of that illustrator before, check them out. The next book I've chosen is this one. This is a hardback book and I love the illustrations in this book. It's called Elsa and the Night, and once again I'm going to struggle with the pronunciation because there's an umlaut there, and I can't remember from my German lessons at school what the umlaut makes the O sound do. Is it Jöns Mellgren or Jons Mellgren? I can't remember, but Jens Mellgren, that's what I'm going to stick with. So Elsa and the Night. And the illustrations in this are beautiful because they're illustrating something that's quite difficult to pin down. So they illustrate the night as a character, which blew my mind. And the way that the night overlaps the city is, it's beautiful. Let me show you. You can see here, this is the character of the night. And look how it overlays onto the city. So where the night passes over the city, it changes the landscape from day to night. So you can see outside here it's daytime, and inside the night it's nighttime, and all the lights in the windows of the buildings are on as it passes. It's brilliant. So I'll read the blurb. One day Elsa hears a creature moving underneath her sofa. When she lures it out, she discovers that it's the night. You're not allowed to be here, she says, and puts it in an old cake tin. 14 hours later, it's still day outside. Elsa in the Night is a subtly composed bedtime story infused with humorous melancholy. And again, it was the illustrations that really did it for me. Not so much these ones, but as soon as the night comes to play in the city, I mean, the use of colour to get emotion is great. You can see that the oranges and the yellows, it's a sunny day, almost oppressively hot I'm feeling from this. And in this page it says, she goes to sit on her balcony, the sun is shining over the city, 14 hours later it's still just as light. People on the street are yawning and rubbing their eyes. That's the way the cookie crumbles, mutters Elsa. It's not my fault. And then you see the people in the city, chaos ensuing. And this is where it starts to get beautiful. You see as the night gets bigger, you can see how the city changes, viewed through the night. I think it's a lovely concept. And as the night gets bigger, more night is shown. Stars in it. Let me find my favourite illustration. It might be that one actually. Oh, it's a toss-up, you know. It's a toss-up between this one, where you've got the beautiful stars and you've got this glimpse of the city, partially in night, partially in day, and Elsa being picked up by the night on her way to sleep. And then this one as well. I like the colours in this one. The oranges and the blues up there are just like, mwah. Elsa is being held to sleep, rocked to sleep by the night, and the night is putting a little blanket over her. But I just love the overlaying colours on these. It's delightful. It makes me smile when I look at it. It's just so clever the way it's been done. Let me know in the comments if you've heard of this author, and let me know if I'm pronouncing their name right. How do you see it? But yeah, I couldn't have been more thrilled when I found this book. It really lit something up in me. Oh, and this one, Lorena Alvarez. This is a graphic novel. It's not really a young children's picture book. It's more of a kind of teen picture book. But it is an explosion of colour. Let me read the back for you. Every night, tiny lights appear out of the darkness in Sandy's bedroom. She catches them and creates wonderful creatures to play with until she falls asleep. And in the morning, she brings them back to life with her whimsical drawings. When a mysterious new girl appears at school, Sandy's drawings are noticed for the first time, but Morphy's fascination with Sandy's talent soon turns into something more sinister. Bum 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 bum. But look at the colours. Look at the colours. I mean, it's such a celebration of illustration. I'd never heard of Lorena Alvarez before. I think it's the first graphic-ish novel book that I'd ever read. And it was such a lovely introduction to the form. It's so tender and sweet, and from the child's point of view, kind of like this book, where the illustrator was illustrating such a kind of abstract concept like the night as a character. Lorena Alvarez is really good at depicting imagination and whimsy and playfulness as something other than a concept in your head. You know, they put form to that kind of abstract concept, which is really nice to see. I also like the story of this because I'm very used to buying picture books for young children, which can deal with dark concepts, but not necessarily in a feeling sinister kind of way, where this is aimed at slightly older children, like young teens, tween type age. It deals with the concept of the sinister. So the character Morphe comes into it. No one else can see Morphe. Morphe is someone who's trying to harness her powers, the main character's powers, for bad. And it's the I don't know, I really like the representation of these abstract things. Concepts such as evil and sinister and imagination and play and control. They're really difficult concepts to get to grips with in words, let alone pictures, and to be able to do it in pictures is amazing. But let me find my favourite page from this book. This one. I'm just going to stop for a second while the bins are collected, because it's creating a bit of background noise. That's better. So the next one is a classic, well, kind of like a modern classic, I suppose. It's by Chris Horton, called Oh No, George. The colours in Chris Horton's books are iconic, I would go as far to say. So Chris Horton uses colours really well. Let me show you. So he uses colours in unusual ways, but which create so much joy on the page. So Oh No, George is about a naughty dog. So a dog that wants to be good but keeps doing things that are not. Here we go. George wants to be good. He tries to be good, but he has just seen a cake in the kitchen. What will George do? And I'm sure loads of kids will identify with this, because that journey to learn what consequences of actions are is something that's an interesting one for kids to learn. I used to be a teaching assistant, so yeah, I understand. But the way that Chris Horton uses colours is magical. And that's all I've got to say on the matter. I'm going to find my favourite illustration. And it's this one. George chasing a cat through the living room. Again, I like the almost overlapping colours and the chaos that's going on here, which kind of drives the movement of the piece through the book, making you want to turn the page to find out what's going to happen later in this trajectory. Nice, a lot of movement in there. But yeah, very good. I like that one. Lovely. The next one is a book by Zachariah O'Hara, and I like it because of the illustrations. I think I got the wrong impression about what this book was going to be because of the language in the title, and I think it's something very specific to how certain areas of the world might talk, but I think that's because it's a cultural difference, which is interesting in its own right. So this is called No Fitz Nelson. I like this book because it felt like it was illustrated in the 70s. It felt very nostalgic. So a lot of books in the 70s when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s were my kids' books, were my books as a kid. It isn't. It's a very modern book. So it was published in 2013. I like how loose the illustrations are. You'll see those in a minute, but they're quite simple, but you get a real feel for the place. So the background buildings, it's definitely set in a place, but it's not overwhelmed with detail, and it's quite loose and energetic. There's a lot of energy in the illustrations. the blurb says, helping kids conquer tantrums, one gorilla fit at a time. I got this from a lovely second-hand bookshop in Buxton. So it's a story about a kid who has a imaginary friend. In a kid's book, you don't know if they're imaginary or if they are real, called Nelson, who has tantrums. My favourite illustration from this book is when they're both in timeout, and you really feel, because there's no background apart from white, and there's just the two characters, and you can really feel the distance between them. It feels isolating, feels lonely. It's a very clever use of space. I like that. It's really interesting looking for your favourite pictures in books, or for your favourite thing in whatever thing is your thing. My thing is children's books. So it's good to analyse what you like about the book and why you like it and why it lights certain things in your brain. It might not be necessarily the most technically amazing thing. No one else may agree with you, but your favourite thing is your favourite thing, and it says something about you, which is very important to note. So there you go. No Fitz Nelson. The next one is by Malachy Doyle and Ed Veer. I never know how to say their name. It's called Too Noisy, and on the back it says, crash, jangle, squawk. Dreamy Sam is fed up with his noisy family and sets off in search of some peace and quiet. When he gets a bit lost and the dark gets a bit scary, can the familiar racket lead him home? So it's about not realising what you've got until it's gone. Again, I like the use of colour, which is, I don't know, it's different to other things that I've seen. So they've got these big blobs of colour to represent, I suppose, well, noise. It's to represent noise. One thing I like about illustrations is it's a great way of representing things that you can't see. So in the other books, it might have been emotions or concepts. Here it's noise. To have a visual for noise is amazing. So you can see all the kind of chaos in the air, which is meant to represent the jingle jangle squawk of the noise, which for children that can't read yet, and you've got to remember that picture books, even though they have words, they tell the story through the pictures. So children who are pre-readers can still access the story and kind of gather what's going on. So pre-readers will be able to understand that something's going on here and this guy is not so happy about it. But I also like when they start, it starts getting darker, when he goes out in search of some quiet and he goes deeper into the woods. I love the colours. My favourite illustration in this is this one. The emotion in it. It's the use of negative space. In this instance, the negative space is dark rather than the white of the page, but it is still negative space, and the words have been cut out to reveal the colours, different colours underneath. So that's what I like. The next one is a very touching story called The Suitcase by Chris Naylor Ballesteros. Chris Naylor Ballesteros. The Suitcase. And on the back it says, when a weary stranger arrives one day with only a suitcase, everyone is full of questions. Why is he here? Where has he come from? And just what is in the suitcase? A story full of heart, hope and kindness about how we treat those in need. And this would be a really good story for people who want to explain asylum seekers, refugees, anyone who's come from somewhere else who might be a little bit different, to understand the humanity and find the humanity in them rather than just the otherness and the difference. So it's a really tender story. I love the illustrations. I love how simple they are, but they pack a punch. Because there's not a lot of background, they use a lot of the white space. You really focus on the illustrations that are there and they don't get lost. So the suitcase is brought by this character who looks a little bit lonesome and weary. And the bird and the fox and the rabbit want to know what's in the suitcase. And the suitcase, what's in the suitcase talks of this character's home, which they no longer have anymore. We don't know why, we don't know where it was, apart from that, it's on a hillside surrounded by trees, and on a clear day you can see the sea. It's all there in my suitcase. It's making me feel a bit emotional. And basically what's in there, without being a spoiler, is a broken cup and a photograph of the character with the cup outside their old house. And the other characters feel so guilty for breaking into this suitcase while this character was asleep that they build them a home away from home. And they glue the cup together. So it's a story about how simple acts of kindness can mean so much, and I think this is my favourite illustration. Okay, on a happier note, Penelope Snoop, Ace Detective. The author is Pamela Butchart and illustrated by Christine Rousset. And on the back it says, Penelope Snoop is the best finder-outer in the whole wide world, and now she has her biggest ever case to solve. Her favourite toy, Sydney, the smelly sock snake, has disappeared and she can't find him anywhere. Will Penelope Snoop and her super sleuthing dog Carlos manage to find Sydney and bring him home in time for bedtime cuddles? It's just a bit of fun, and it's full of vibrant joy and loveliness, and it really kind of sheds a light into kids and how they play. It delves into the bizarre world of a kid's imagination, which is, I don't know, it's one of the wonders of the world. I really like the colour palette in it as well. I like that neon pink, which I don't know whether it comes across on the camera because neons often don't, but the neon pink's a really nice kind of anchor for all of the illustrations. And my favourite illustration is this one. I think I've got a thing for double page spreads using a white background, the good use of negative space and filling the whole page. I think basically that's what I'm getting from analysing my favourite pages in these books. So yeah, magnifying glasses out, following the clues. This next one is a classic, and I'm sure I don't need to go too much into it. So Julia Donaldson and Axel Scheffler, Snail and the Whale. The thing I love about this is the rhyme, really, as much as anything else. I mean, the illustrations are beautiful. Axel Scheffler is very talented, so lovely. But it's the rhymes that really kind of anchors it for me. On the back it says, the sea snail slithered all over the rock and gazed at the sea and the ships in the dock, and as she gazed she sniffed and sighed, the sea is deep and the world is wide, how I long to sail, said the tiny snail. This was always a really good book to read to the kids when I was a teaching assistant. I used to work with kids between the ages of 4 and 6, 7, and they all loved these rhyming books. I think my favourite illustration was that one I've just shown you. That one. Let me read you the first page. If you've never heard this before, if you've been living under a rock. This is a tale of a tiny snail and a great big grey-blue humpback whale. This is a rock as black as soot, and this is a snail with an itchy foot. The sea snail slithered all over the rock and gazed at the sea and the ships in the dock, and as she gazed she sniffed and sighed. The sea is deep and the world is wide, how I long to sail, said the tiny snail. And it carries on in that rhyming pattern, and it's just, it's delicious to read out loud. Oof, we're halfway through. I'm going to start speeding up because I'm pretty sure this is going to be the most boring video ever. But it's nice to look at different books, and I like videos like this that suggest new illustrators to me and new authors to me that I've never have considered before. This one is a book full of heart, and it is A Place to Call Home by Alexis Deacon and Vivian Schwartz. This book is actually signed as well. Found it in the charity shop, £1.50. It's about a bunch of hamsters who are looking for home, and it's just funny. It's hilarious. The blurb says, what happens when you grow too big for your nice, warm, safe home? You have to go out into the world and find a new one. So here, they've got their heads covered in wellies and gloves and stuff like that. So they're going over a puddle. Have we done it? Have we crossed the sea? I don't think so. Have we done it now, brother? Have we crossed the sea? Yes, somehow. Hooray, we did it. We crossed the sea. Now where are we? Is this our home? It can't be. It's damp. But we came so far. We have to go on. It's just wonderful. And my favourite illustrations on this one. Okay, I like this. It's actually a merging of illustrations and photographs. So they look through a hole in the fence and there's a photograph beyond it. It's got a nice big photograph of what's behind. Quite like that. I thought that was nice. Maria Altez has written Little Monkey, and it is a delight, not just for the eyes, but for the brain. The blurb says, it's hard being a little monkey in a big jungle, and Monkey has had enough of being left out. So she's off to climb to the very top of the tallest tree, and she's going to do it all on her own. It's nice to find a book that is a female protagonist, that isn't very, like, obviously, I am a female protagonist. It's not like that's not the point of the story. It's just by the by. And you don't realise how many books are written with a boy as the main character until you are a little girl sitting in a classroom listening to all of these stories. And then you hear one that's got a female protagonist and suddenly your brain lights up. A lot of these actually have female protagonists, and it's probably subconsciously because I really like it. I like the illustrations in this book. I think they're luscious and unctuous. And again, use quite a lot of white space, but also have a lot of detail as well. A nice balance between detail, colour and white space. It's not overwhelming for the eye. My favourite illustration, this one at the end. I like how they're all piled on. I don't know, it's full of love, full of heart. This next one is by Catherine Rayner. You've probably heard of it. Catherine Rayner's, pretty famous. The illustrations are delightful. They really hit me in my heart. I love all of Catherine Rayner's stuff. And this is Harris Finds His Feet. And hairs also have a place in my heart. They're just so, I don't know, graceful and comical at the same time. That Venn diagram of graceful and comical overlaps 100%. The blurb says, Harris was a very small hare with very big feet. Why do I have such enormous feet, Grandad? Harris sighed. So Grandad shows Harris how to hop high into the sky, to climb to the top of the mountains and to run very fast. Harris not only learns about the world around him, but also feels the importance of finding his own feet. A beautiful and remarkable story of a child's journey to independence. That blurb says it all, doesn't it? But just look at the delicious illustrations. Again, a confident use of white space, but with quite a lot of detail. I love the textures. So the texture on Grandad, really lovely. Managed to retain a painterly feel while also being 100% illustration. Let me find my favourite page. It's going to have to be a double page spread with a good use of the white space. So it's this one. I'm nothing if not consistent. Okay, this is by Claire Fredman. It's by Claire Friedman and Kate Hindley, Oliver and Patch. I like the colour palette. It might be a bit too busy for me in terms of colours, only just, but there's something about these blues and the oranges that are just on the right side of interesting for me. It's a really nice story. So on the back it says, when Oliver finds his little lost dog called Patch, he makes his first friend in the big new city. The trouble is, he knows that someone somewhere will be looking for him. A beautifully told story that will tug at your heart. So he finds a dog. So there, he says he made some posters, but secretly he hoped no one would see them. But then someone did see them, and he ends up making friends with the little girl who lost the dog. So it all works out in the end. I don't really know what it is about this book that I like. It's cute and it's heartfelt and it's slightly nostalgic. It's got a feel of some of the books I used to read when I was younger. And my favourite illustration in this one, it's a double page spread, but it doesn't have any white space. It's fully coloured in. But I like the zooming out from the building that he's in, being all lonely, to the big city beyond, and you can see in all of the windows that there's something going on. Nice. All right, the next book is by Michael Foreman and Janet Charters, and it's called The General. I've talked about this before in one of my videos. This is mind-blowing. It's amazing. It's definitely worth a read. The illustrations are glorious. The story is glorious. Let me read the blurb. There was once a proud general who fell off his horse only to discover the beauty of the flowers on the ground around him. From that day on, he vowed to change the world into a place of peace and beauty. At the height of the Cold War, a young couple produced a new kind of book for children. It confronted the folly of war and the threat to the environment. This revised edition is just as fresh and relevant today as it was then, unfortunately. There's a publisher's note about the people who wrote the book. So Janet Charters, now Abyss, was born in England in 1938 on the eve of the Second World War. Growing up in the uncertain atmosphere created by the Cold War and the nuclear arms race, Janet developed an acute awareness of the fragility of peace. And Michael Foreman, who was also born in England in 1938, it says, having not known a world without war, he thought that it was normal. One frightful night, when the 3-year-old Michael lay fast asleep, a bomb came crashing through his bedroom ceiling. This was his first memory. The bomb missed him by a few centimetres, bounced on the floor, hit the wall, and then dropped into the fireplace where it exploded up the chimney. When the war ended, Michael looked forward to a world of peace. But unfortunately, his teenage years were lived under the threat of nuclear war. I mean, it's really sad that nothing much has changed, but this book tries to right that wrong, tries to kind of square the circle. And I do think if more kids read books like this, the world would have nicer adults growing up in it. But aside from the lovely story, the illustrations are just lovely and playful and wonderful. And I mean, very of a time, feels very 60s, but so playful and delicious. I love the colour palette. I love how painterly it is. Let me show you a really nice one. There's the general sitting in his field of flowers when he has his revelation. And I think my favourite illustration is this one, when he invites other famous generals from around the world to sit in his field of flowers, and they all have revelations and they're just having such a lovely time. But this is definitely worth a read. The story is beautiful and the illustrations are just as beautiful, and definitely go and buy it. Buy it. Obviously, you do you. The last one is a book that I found in a charity shop. It's Japanese, from the 60s. I think it's from the 60s. It's from the 60s, 67. And it's written by Chizuko Kuratomi and illustrated by Kozo Katimoto. And it's lovely. I love, as much as anything, I love the paper that it's on. So the paper is like textured. It's, I don't know why it feels so new and alien and different to me, but the paper feels like a treat. It feels so different to any children's book paper that I've experienced, that it makes this a little adventure on its own. But the book is great as well. So it's about Mr. Bear who goes on his adventure and he wants to go out to sea, and he chooses a boat, and the boat is this boat that's manned by rabbits, or kind of chartered by rabbits. And Mr. Bear helps, has a big adventure, and then decides he actually doesn't want to be on the sea anymore. He wants to be back in his mountain. But the illustrations are delightful, the story is delightful, and the actual format of the book is lovely. I think I've just stumbled upon my favourite. Oh no. Which is my favourite? I've got two favourites in this one. This big double page spread, which even though this isn't white of the page, it's got a good negative space usage. So it's the little boat and the land. And then my other one is this one. The reflections, I just really love the reflections. And again, a good confident use of negative space. One thing that's really quite unusual about this book is that the book starts and ends on the actual cover. So the first part of the book is written down here, where normally you'd have a couple of pages for the copyright page and stuff, but that starts and ends on the covers, which is quite nice and interesting. So I hope you've enjoyed this video where I've been just nattering about my favourite children's books, most of which are found in charity shops. Please do let me know in the comments any of your own favourite children's book authors, children's book illustrators, picture books, anything like that, because I'm always up for hearing about new things and illustrators and authors that I've never even heard about. But I'm going to leave this video here. If you liked it, please consider giving a thumbs up, a comment or a subscribe on the video. No obligation. But I'm going to leave this video here, so hopefully you'll catch me in the next video. So until then, bye!